Hey everyone, there is a bunch of information in Module 5 this week, and it actually directs you to Module 7 where there's even more information about putting together a couple of components of your research paper that will be due at the end of the quarter. So I wanted to put together this quick presentation to talk to you a little bit about problem statements, purpose statements, questions, and methods. So I'll run through about 12 slides here, and I'll go through in as much detail as I can, or as much detail as I think we need to cover each of these components. First, it's useful to understand the components, the standard components of a standard research paper. And many research papers, whether they be like a dissertation or they be a research article that has been published in a scientific journal or even just a journal, one that's not scientific, they tend to follow a specific format or an accepted format or just a standard format. And they have 5 parts. The first part is usually the introduction, and that's where basically the introduction of the topic is made, any relevant information about the topic is included, and the information about kind of the background of that particular topic is begun. In the second section is where we really look at the background or literature review, and what we're trying to do in that section is trying to ground the research project or research questions in enough background, enough information so that it makes sense. What we're doing actually makes sense. So once we do that, then if we're doing really like a sort of a scientific paper where we're doing actually a documentation of a study that we did, we will go into the method section. The method section is where we describe specifically what we did in our study and what variables did we look at, what factors did we look at, what questions did we ask. Then we'll go into a section that is about the findings. And the findings are, when we conducted our research, what did we find? And then lastly, we'll finish up with analysis. What do our findings mean? One of the things that kind of drives research is depending on 2 formats. It's either a problem statement or a research question. And we really introduce that in the introduction piece. We'll introduce either the research statement, the research question or the problem statement in the introduction, and then build the rest of the study around that. We're not going to really do a full-on primary research paper, but we're going to do something that looks fairly similar. So we won't follow the strict format for this paper, but we will have a problem statement, a purpose statement, and research questions if they are relevant to the problem statement. Here is what we will have in our papers, and that is we will start with an introduction. And I'll describe the introduction to you in a little bit. We'll talk about a purpose. What is the purpose of the paper? What is the problem statement? That's kind of what you're going to center your entire paper on. And then any research questions. And the research questions really have to relate back to that problem statement. So they're not just general questions about your topic, but they're general questions about the statement of the problem. If you state a problem is X, then you may have questions about X. And that's what the research questions really are. We're not really going to have a method section, but you might talk about the way that you're actually going to conduct your research, your secondary research, and what sources you're going to consult, and how you're actually going to try to address your problem statement and research questions. Okay, let's talk about the introduction. The introduction is really, in your paper, is going to be where you sort of establish the scope of your paper. You identify what your field of interest is, and you identify information about that field of interest, all in an effort to help us understand more about that field. We are your readers. We are going to be looking at your paper, and so what do you need us to know about your field in order that we can understand the significance of the paper that you've written? So tell us what we need to know, because when you make your problem statement, we need to have some grounding in information, some grounding in this field, so that we can understand the significance of your problem statement. So again, ground us so that we understand your problem, purpose, and any questions by providing us with a solid introduction. Once you have given us that introduction and set sort of the ground for us to be able to understand your topic, the next thing that comes along is going to be your problem statement. And the problem statement is really a powerful tool to be used when writing a paper, whether it's secondary or primary research. The problem statement is just kind of sort of becomes the foundation of the actual paper. And the problem statement is really the reason why you're even doing this. You're doing this because you've identified a problem in your field, and you are going to conduct some research by consulting the work of experts, synthesizing that, and being able to present that, evaluating it and presenting it to us, so we get a better understanding of not only the problem, but what potentially the solutions to that problem could be. Couple aspects of a problem statement is that it represents a clear problem in your field of interest. Okay, I don't want a problem statement that is just your opinion, something you think is, out there, something that you really don't have any substantiation for. So later on, I'm going to talk to you about making sure that you substantiate your problem by citing experts who indicate that it in fact is a problem. Again, I won't want to accept a problem statement that doesn't have some level of substantiation. Your problem statement should be having a negative impact on some area of your field of interest. It could be business, it could be social, it could be whatever field you want to follow. But your problem statement that you identify should be a real problem for those people who work in the field. And also, if it's a real problem, then its resolution will be of value. Be sure that your problem is clear and that it's succinct. And I would also say that it's targeted. Who is it really impacting? So be clear about the problem. A bit more about the problem statement. Don't try to make your problem statement too large. Try to make it something that you can actually find information on, and the information that you find can address the actual problem statement. So don't try to research every aspect of the problem for the whole world. That's just too much to do in one research paper. And select a defined population or scope and be clear about who is being impacted by this problem. But don't make it too limited. I mean, don't make it, some company down the road is having this problem. Well, who cares, or don't make the scope of it too small. Just, a couple of people are experiencing the problem, or 5 students at one school are experiencing this problem. Make it something that if you look into the research and you start identifying how people can solve the problem, it's really going to be significant for a larger group than just a small, tiny collection of students or employees. And a bit more about the problem. It's oftentimes really useful if you can find a problem that's unique. And the uniqueness of your problem makes it more interesting. If it's something that a lot of people have looked at, for example, like employee retention, that could be interesting if it's in the right context. But if it's employee retention in a specific type of company that is a new type of company or something we've not seen or researched before, that could be really interesting. So if you can, try to make it something that has not been addressed before. Again, make sure it's substantiated in the literature. You'll see that in the example that I show you. And try to describe your problem to a level of detail that makes it meaningful. We may not understand very much about the field that you've chosen, so try to give us as much detail as possible about the particular problem that you're looking at, without going overboard, of course. And then make sure it's not your opinion or anything that appears like your opinion. We want to see citations that really truly show that it is a problem in your field or your field of choice. A couple challenges that we see with problem statements are, first, it's not a problem. Somebody has chosen something that's really a question. And a good example would be a lack of knowledge. We don't know much about a particular entity or a particular practice or something like that. Is that still a problem that we don't know about it? Well, it could be. And it could be okay that you don't, that you're looking at a reason why we don't understand, we don't know something. Another common problem I see with problem statements is that there's no substantiation in the literature. There's no citations, there's no references, there's no nothing, and I really do need to see that. And I've said it 3 times now, so you're never going to forget it. It's mostly the student's opinion. That's a big problem with the problem statement. It's too broad in scope. It could be something like employee retention or communication. Well, that's really broad in scope. What about communication? And what specifically about communication? Or what about multiculturalism? What specifically about multiculturalism is it that is of interest to you? And then again, going along with the broadness of scope is that it takes on the problem for the whole world. And you might want to narrow down the scope. We're going to look at multicultural communication in a particular industry, in a particular region of Washington State. And that could be, something that really helps you focus it, focus your problem on something specific enough. Let's move on to the purpose statement. What is a purpose statement? A purpose statement is, once you've identified your problem, the problem is X. The purpose statement really ties to the problem statement. So the purpose statement is really probably going to be about finding research and experts and opinions and work and stuff that's been done out there that relates back to your problem statement. The purpose statement could be to shed light on a particular problem that you've identified, or it could be to provide information to those who might read your paper about your particular topic. So really, in your purpose statement, you're going to be you're explaining why you're doing this research and what you hope to accomplish. Be sure to tie it back to your problem statement, because the problem statement, remember, is the foundation of your paper. And you might start out, the purpose statement is, the purpose of this paper will be to, boom, whatever it is that you're hoping to accomplish with your paper. The next thing to think about is research questions. Now, you may or may not have research questions. It's not a requirement that you have them. But what they're really used for is they're really used to help narrow the problem statement. So you may have some specific questions about your problem statement that you want to answer, and that could help really guide the sources that you consult and the information that you pull into your paper. So one thing for you to look at is, are there any specific questions, and these all have to relate back to your problem statement, that you intend to address. It allows you to be more specific about what you want to learn about your problem, and the questions also allow you to narrow the scope so you can focus on the part of your problem that's important. So again, really it's used as sort of an area or a way to be able to refine what parts of your problem statement you really want to zone in on. On this slide, I have given you an example, and this example relates back to the topic of data analytics. And I've given you the intro, the problem statement, purpose statement, and a couple of potential research questions that we might actually use in a paper that is on this topic. The introduction in this case could be that many businesses are gathering large amounts of data as systems become more automated. And I put ... there because your introduction is going to need to be complete enough and full enough that you really truly set the stage for us to be able to understand the rest of the stuff that you're going to be including. So I might say that businesses are gathering large amounts of data. Here's the kind of data that they're gathering. Here's the processes that are allowing them to gather that data. It's coming in either in batches or it's coming in real time. Some companies are using it to sort of help them identify more about their customers, but many companies are not using it at all. So that could be kind of the stuff that you would put into the introduction. The next piece of it would be the problem statement. And note here, according to Smith 2011 and Jones 2013, those are my sources that I'm citing to indicate that the problem is a real problem out there in the field and not just my opinion. Most companies are not able to implement solid analysis processes to make the best use of the data they are gathering. Clear? Succinct. Now I might even go into specifics on this one and make it a little more refined. I could say companies in the e-commerce fields or companies in another segment of the market, or I might, I can be more specific if I need to for my paper, but it could be something that allows me to sort of zoom in. The purpose statement would be that the paper will investigate and summarize research relative to the reasons why companies are failing to maximize the data that they are gathering. The investigation will look at structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data sources and cite recommendations that could help companies make better use of their data. So that is the purpose. Now, if I have refined my problem statement to focus on a single segment of a marketplace, then my purpose would have to reflect that as well. The last part of my example is relating back to some potential questions that I could use, and those questions could help me focus my research by further defining my problem statement. So in this example, what is the most common format of data that is being gathered? So of the e-commerce companies out there that I'm looking at, what kind of data are they gathering? What is the most common reasons why this data is not being used to benefit the companies that gather it? Why aren't they doing something with it? And then the last step could be what steps could be taken to educate company leaders about the best ways to maximize the usefulness of their data. So these are all questions that relate directly back to the problem statement and even the purpose statement, and that can help me sort of target the direction that I take with this paper. The last thing I'll address in this slide is methodology or methods. Generally for a secondary research paper. Now, secondary research is where you actually consult the work of experts and you summarize and evaluate their work and present that as an argument to sort of address a problem statement or answer any questions that you've come up with. So in secondary research, we don't really have a real method section. What we might have instead is your explanation of who you consulted, how you found them, how you pulled their information out, synthesized it, evaluated, and presented it. You might have something about that in your paper. Specifically, if you're looking at specific experts or a specific field, you might talk about that in the methods section. But a method section in a paper like what we're going to produce isn't going to be very long. In primary research, where you're actually conducting your own research, you're not consulting the work of others, but you're consulting your own work because you're doing your own study, the methods section is where you describe down to the last detail the specific research that you did, the specific practices, processes, and everything that you did, and identify how that research methodology supports your problem statement, your purpose statement, and how it will answer the questions, your research questions. So it's a much bigger deal in a primary research study, but we're not going to go into that level of detail. So anyway, that gives you a bit about problem statements, purpose statements, and research questions. And if you have any questions, as you start putting those together, let me know. You're going to be asked to produce your problem statement and purpose statement this week. So there's an opportunity for you to go ahead and put that in. Feel free to circulate or send those to me before you submit them, so that I can give you some advice about what format they could be in or anything like that. Or if you feel pretty confident in the way that they're formatted, go ahead and just submit them and I'll take a look at them once they're done. Okay, thanks, bye.